"That isn't a Porsche," Evelyn Rourke said into the auction microphone. "It's $800 worth of gray primer, shaped like somebody's expensive mistake." The laugh that moved through Rourke Heritage Motors was polite because most of the people in the room did business with her. Daniel Mercer did not laugh. He stood beside his 14-year-old son Owen and studied the empty body shell beneath the white inspection lights. It had no engine, no glass, no seats, and no wheels worth saving. A crooked identification plate had been fastened near the front compartment with two bright hardware store rivets. But beneath the primer, Daniel could see close, regular seam welds and a boxed center tunnel that no backyard kit builder would have spent the money to make. Evelyn lowered the microphone and looked straight at him. At 49, she had turned 3 luxury dealerships and a collector car finance company into a fortune large enough for the business pages to call her a billionaire. "You asked whether the number was genuine," she said. "It isn't. My people checked. If you want a decoration for your body shop, take it. But don't come back pretending I sold you history." Daniel asked to see the intake report. Evelyn's smile held, but one of the 2 men beside her shifted his feet. "There is no provenance report," she said. "This is a non-title display shell, sold as is, with no warranty of identity. $800, plus the tow. Yes or no?" At 55, Daniel had repaired collision-damaged frames for 31 years. He knew what a modified car looked like, and he knew what a man with a welding torch could imitate. The shell in front of him had details he could not explain. That did not make it valuable. It made Evelyn's certainty careless. He signed the sale receipt. By the time the flatbed pulled the gray shell into the sunlight, Evelyn had already returned to the next lot. Daniel's old Shepherd mix, Scout, watched from the open rear window of his pickup. Scout had belonged to Daniel's wife, Rachel, and still wore the brass heart tag she had ordered 11 years earlier. One side carried the dog's name. The other held a single word Rachel had chosen: home. Owen looked from the shell to the receipt. $800 for something she says is fake. $800 for steel I can measure, Daniel said. "The story costs nothing until we can prove it." He did not yet know that the wrong number Evelyn had mocked would connect the shell to a prototype stolen 18 years earlier. He did not know her dealership had been warned about that possibility before the auction. And he had no idea that within 3 weeks, he would have to choose between enough money to save his shop and returning the most valuable object he had ever touched to people he had never met. The flatbed driver tightened the last strap. Daniel photographed each corner of the shell, the riveted plate, the empty wheel wells, and the condition of the center tunnel. He had learned that habit from insurance work. Before a wrench moved, the camera moved. The timestamps were ordinary details on ordinary jobs, but they kept arguments from becoming memories. Evelyn came through the service door with her phone in one hand. "Documenting your bargain?" "Documenting what I bought." "Then get the fake plate in focus." She held her own phone toward Daniel and the shell. "Our followers enjoy confidence." Owen turned away. Daniel could feel the boy trying not to show embarrassment. He resisted the easier answer. "Make sure you keep the original video," he said. For the first time, Evelyn stopped smiling. Then the auctioneer called her name and she walked back inside. Mercer Frame and Body occupied a cinder block building at the edge of Bellwether, Ohio, where the old machine tool district met a line of newer warehouses. Daniel's father had opened the shop in 1978. Daniel had added a laser measuring rack and a proper frame bench, but the roof still leaked above the parts room and the office furnace complained every January. Rachel had run the books until ovarian cancer reduced her world from the office, to the house, to a hospital room that smelled of plastic curtains. She had been gone 3 years. The medical debt was finally settled, but the shop had missed 2 property tax installments while Daniel learned, badly, to do both of their jobs. A certified notice in his desk drawer gave him 42 days to pay $14,600 or enter a county payment action. The shell was not supposed to be a lottery ticket. Daniel had expected to salvage period sheet metal, map the unusual reinforcement work, and perhaps sell the body to a specialist who understood what it was. If the metal proved modern, he would use sections as training pieces for 2 younger technicians. Either way, he believed he could recover $800 without lying to anyone. That Monday evening, he and Owen rolled the shell into the locked measurement bay. Scout followed until Daniel closed the half-height safety gate. The dog settled on Rachel's old canvas shop mat outside the bay, chin on his paws, watching father and son stretch datum strings beneath the empty body. The dimensions were the first contradiction. A homemade imitation usually wandered as it moved from front to back. This shell did not. Its suspension pickup points sat within 2 millimeters of a precise centerline, even after decades of rough storage. Narrow reinforcement plates had been added where the rear structure met the central tunnel. They were not pretty, but each one had been shaped with the same die. Owen held the work light while Daniel examined the exterior identification plate. Why do the letters look crooked? Because they are. The spacing changes after the fourth character. Daniel touched one rivet with a plastic probe. And these are too new. Somebody wanted this plate to be noticed. So she was right. It's fake. The plate is wrong. That doesn't tell us what the body is. The difference mattered to Daniel. A false label could hide a cheap copy. It could also hide something a thief needed to move. Scout rose when a delivery truck rattled past the shop. The dog pressed against the gate, and Owen reached over to clip the leash onto his collar. At that moment, Scout turned toward the sound. The worn split ring holding the brass heart caught against the gate wire. It opened, and the tag bounced once on the concrete, before slipping through an oval service opening in the shell's bare center tunnel. Owen dropped to his knees. "Dad, that was Mom's." Daniel heard the metal tag slide farther than it should have. He tried a flexible magnet, but the brass did not move. He could have removed a tunnel panel, yet several screw heads carried old paint and undisturbed grime. Opening them before he understood the shell would destroy useful evidence. He brought out the 8mm inspection camera used for checking boxed frame rails. Owen fed the cable through the service opening while Daniel watched the small screen. The camera passed a welded cable guide, a patch of dull blue-green paint beneath the gray primer, and a row of hammer marks too regular to be accidental. Then the brass heart came into view, resting against an inner ledge. Just above it, beneath a thin smear of black sealant, was a stamped sequence, X04118. Daniel did not touch the sealant. He withdrew the camera, saved the full recording, and made 2 backup copies before retrieving the tag with a loop of wire. When he fastened it to Scout's collar with a new stainless ring, his fingers stayed on the word home for a second longer than necessary. Owen looked through the bay window at the shell. Is that another VIN? It's a factory-style chassis stamp. Maybe an experimental number. Maybe somebody's private mark. Daniel locked the bay and wrote the time in the job ledger. Until we know, nothing gets sanded and nothing gets sold. The next morning he searched printed registries and online mark archives. The crooked exterior plate matched no recognized production format. The hidden sequence was even stranger. Its X prefix appeared in a short technical article about European experimental bodies, but the article listed no surviving chassis numbers. Daniel sent a careful email to Dr. Mara Vance, curator of the nonprofit Atlantic Motor Archive. He did not claim he had found a prototype. He attached 4 photographs, the unedited inspection camera video, his receipt, and the auction listing. He asked one question. Did the construction justify professional examination? Mara called 26 minutes later. "Do not clean that stamp," she said. Her voice was level, but Daniel could hear a chair move. "Do not remove the outer plate. Do not drill any panel. Is the shell secured?" "Locked bay, cameras on both doors." "Good. The sequence may correspond to a development ledger I've seen only in microfilm. It may also be an imitation built by someone who saw the same ledger. I need measurements, weld photographs, and paint samples taken by an independent lab before I'll say more." Daniel asked what X4 meant. "Right now, it means you need better evidence." That answer made him trust her. Before noon, Evelyn Rourke called. She did not mention Mara. "Our accounting department found a classification problem," she said. "The shell should have been sold for display to a licensed dismantler. I can refund your $800 and pay $1,500 for inconvenience." Daniel looked through the office window at the locked bay. "You said it was a non-title display shell and put that on the receipt. I'm offering you a clean exit. Send the classification problem in writing." The line stayed quiet for 2 seconds. "You're a collision man, Mr. Mercer. You bought an object with a false number. That can become an unpleasant position. Then the paperwork should help both of us." She ended the call without promising to send it. Daniel's first consequential choice had cost $800. His second began costing him by the hour. He moved a municipal utility truck out of the measurement bay and returned its deposit because the shell could not be left in an unsecured area. The canceled job would have covered nearly a third of his tax bill. Then he hired Northline Materials Lab to document paint layers and metal composition under witnessed conditions. The estimate was $2,800, payable before testing. Owen found him at the kitchen table that night with the tax notice, the lab estimate, and Rachel's old adding machine. Scout lay beneath the table, the repaired tag touching the floor whenever he breathed. "What if it's nothing?" Owen asked. "Then we paid to learn exactly what nothing looks like." "That's a lot of money for a lesson." Daniel turned the tax notice face down. "You're right." The accurate criticism hurt more than Evelyn's mockery. Daniel had made the purchase without seeing an intake report and without knowing whether the shell could legally be titled. Skill did not excuse risk. He told Owen that if the lab found modern steel or copied welds, the investigation would stop. He would sell only ordinary salvage parts, repay the shop account from his personal truck fund, and take responsibility for the loss. Owen nodded, not because he liked the answer, but because it contained a limit. Northline's technician arrived Wednesday with a handheld alloy analyzer, a calibrated coating gauge, and numbered evidence bags. Daniel filmed the process from a fixed camera. The technician took microscopic paint flakes from an already damaged edge. Beneath the gray primer were black sealer, a thin coat of blue-green test paint, and an older yellow chromate layer. The steel chemistry matched European automotive sheet produced around the end of the 1960s. It did not prove a particular manufacturer, but it made a recent kit body unlikely. The welds offered more. On commercial cars, factories used enough welds to meet durability targets without wasting time. The shell had dense seam welding around the suspension points and removable reinforcement brackets near the rear bulkhead. It had been built to survive repeated changes, not to leave a normal assembly line. Mara joined the inspection by video and asked Daniel to measure 6 holes inside the central tunnel. Their spacing matched a fixture diagram in the archive to within 1 millimeter. "What fixture?" Owen asked from outside the marked work area. Mara looked at Daniel before answering. "A test data recorder, the machine that recorded suspension load before small sensors could do the job." That was the first measurable proof. The shell was not an ordinary imitation. It had been built around equipment used by a professional development program. It was also the moment Evelyn changed from dismissing Daniel to trying to control him. Her lawyer's letter arrived by courier that afternoon. It accused Daniel of removing, altering, or concealing vehicle identifiers, and demanded immediate return of the shell to Rourke Heritage Motors for regulatory remediation. It prohibited him from publishing images connected to the Rourke name and warned that the dealership would notify state authorities if he refused. Daniel read the letter twice, then called the Ohio Vehicle Theft and Fraud Unit himself. He did not ask how to keep the car. He asked how to preserve it. Detective Lena Ortiz returned his call before the shop closed. She had spent 17 years working stolen construction equipment, collector cars, and fraudulent titles. Her first instruction was simple. Daniel was not to move the outer plate, expose more of the hidden stamp, or invite anyone onto the property without a written chain of custody plan. "The dealer says you altered the number," she said. "Their own auction photographs show the outer plate. Photographs show a plate. They don't show who put it there. What do you have from before you brought the shell home?" Daniel listed the flatbed photographs, the auction video, the sale listing, and the measurement bay cameras. "Preserve the original files, not just copies," Ortiz said. "And understand this now. If that shell is identified as stolen property, a bill of sale will not make it yours." Daniel looked at the $800 receipt on his desk. "I understand." Ortiz scheduled a preliminary visit for Friday. Until then, she asked him not to announce the discovery. That request suited him. Public attention would not answer a technical question, and it might contaminate witness statements before anyone knew which witnesses mattered. Evelyn supplied the attention anyway. The following morning, Rourke Heritage Motors posted a short clip from the auction. It showed Daniel beside the shell while Evelyn called the identification plate fake. The caption said an uninformed local buyer had refused a full refund and was now making unsupported claims about a replica body. Daniel's name was not used, but the shop sign on his work shirt was clear enough for bellwether. By lunch, 3 customers had called. One postponed a frame repair because he did not want his insurance claim connected to some VIN investigation. Another asked whether Daniel was about to become rich. The third, an old fleet manager named Gus Webb, asked whether Daniel needed a camera system with an off-site backup. "Already installed," Daniel said. "Then don't argue online," Gus told him. "A clean record talks longer than a loud man." Daniel printed the Rourke post, saved the original web page through his attorney, and returned to work. The shop's younger technician wanted to post the lab result in response. Daniel refused. Northline had proved period construction, not ownership or identity. Claiming more would give Evelyn the strongest argument she had, that a struggling mechanic had turned uncertainty into publicity. Friday morning, Detective Ortiz examined the shell with a state forensic photographer. Daniel stayed outside the evidence boundary unless she asked a question. She checked the outer plate under magnification, photographed the rivets, and took impressions of the characters. Then Daniel played the unedited video of Scout's tag falling through the service opening and the inspection camera finding X04118. Ortiz watched it a second time. "Your dog created a useful accident." Rachel always said he had expensive timing. It was the first time Daniel had said his wife's name to a stranger in weeks. He looked toward the office, where Scout slept beneath the desk Rachel had once used. Ortiz did not make the moment larger than it was. She signed the evidence log and asked Mara Vance to join them by secure call. Mara had located a reference to X4 in a private archive index. The index described 4 experimental bodies built for a handling and endurance program. 3 had documented endings. 1. Body X4 had been retained by the factory, later sold through an approved transfer to American industrialist Anders Harland, and photographed in his private collection in 1997. The collection photograph showed only the rear 3/4 view. Most of the car was hidden behind a race transporter, but the visible shell carried the same removable reinforcement bracket and a small crescent-shaped dent above the left rear suspension pocket. Daniel took Ortiz to the shell. The crescent dent was still there under the primer. "That makes it interesting," Ortiz said. "It doesn't make it X4. Mara agreed. "We need the original transfer record, construction photographs, and the theft file. We also need to know whether the stamp's depth and tool pattern match the period. A copied number on an old shell is still a copied number." Daniel felt relief rather than frustration. Each careful refusal made the final answer more trustworthy. The theft file changed the nature of the story the following Tuesday. Ortiz found it through a national property database, after the ordinary vehicle search returned nothing. X4 had never been registered for road use, so its experimental number did not behave like a conventional VIN. It appeared instead in a 2008 specialty insurance loss report. The shell had vanished from a climate-controlled warehouse owned by the Harland Motor Foundation. The theft occurred during a roof repair after several collection cars had been moved between buildings. Security footage from the loading area was lost when a recorder failed. Investigators believed the thieves had disguised X4 with gray primer and a false identification plate before moving it through salvage channels. The case went cold after 2 suspects were convicted on unrelated equipment thefts. Crescent Specialty Insurance had paid the foundation $3,800,000 under an agreed value policy. In exchange, Crescent received recovery rights to X4. The foundation retained the right to reacquire and exhibit the body if it was ever found. Daniel read the report at his workbench, while Owen did homework at the other end. Scout's nails clicked across the concrete, and the brass heart tapped his water bowl. "So it was stolen," Owen said. "If our shell is X4, yes. And the insurance company owns it. That is what the paid claim says." Owen looked at the tax notice pinned beneath the office calendar. "Then, why did we spend money proving it?" Daniel had no answer that would make $2,800 reappear. "Because once we saw the hidden number, pretending we hadn't seen it would have been a choice too. But we paid for it. Paying the wrong person doesn't erase the loss of the right person." Owen's jaw tightened. He was old enough to understand the rule and young enough to hate its price. He closed his school book, clipped Scout's leash on, and took the dog around the block without another word. That evening, Daniel received an offer from Evelyn. It came through her attorney and carried a confidentiality agreement. Rourke Heritage Motors would pay $35,000, refund the purchase price, cover Northline's invoice, and remove its online post. In return, Daniel would transfer the shell, all photographs, all samples, and every copy of the inspection video. He would also agree that he had found no verified factory identifier. $35,000 would clear the tax notice, replace the failing roof membrane, and leave enough to restore the utility truck account Daniel had lost. The agreement did not ask him to lie about the shell's identity. It asked him to say the identity had not been verified, which was still technically true. Daniel placed the pages beside Rachel's adding machine. The machine's paper roll still held her faded handwriting on the cardboard core. She had been better than he was at separating what a person could afford from what a person should do. He called Evelyn rather than her lawyer. "Why do you need every copy of the video?" "Because incomplete technical material can damage a brand," she said. "You are being paid for cooperation, not for the object." "Did your intake team see X4 before the auction?" "No." "Did anyone warn you the outside number covered an experimental body?" "No one gave me a verified warning." That was not the same answer. Daniel asked for one change. He would transfer the shell directly to Crescent Specialty Insurance or the state, not to Rourke. He would provide evidence to all lawful claimants and accept reimbursement only for documented expenses. The confidentiality clause would apply to customer information, not to the vehicle's history or the dealership's intake records. Evelyn's tone lost its practiced warmth. "You don't have the leverage to rewrite this." "Then I don't have a deal. You are risking your shop for property you cannot own." It was an accurate statement, and Daniel felt its weight. "I'm protecting the record of how it reached me." He declined the offer in writing. The next day, Crescent sent Martin Shaw, its senior recovery examiner, to Bellwether. Martin was 63, broad-shouldered, and patient enough to read every page before looking at the shell. He brought the original policy, the signed subrogation agreement, and a copy of a recovery notice the foundation had renewed every 5 years. The notice offered 10% of net recovered value, capped at $1,250,000, to a finder who lawfully reported and preserved X4 without participating in its concealment. Daniel did not allow himself to calculate the cap. "Does that notice still apply?" "If this is X4, and if your conduct meets the conditions, the review committee decides," Martin said. "It is not a promise from me." "Good." Martin raised an eyebrow. Promises from one man are how this got complicated. The examiner spent 6 hours reconciling photographs, dates, and file hashes. He confirmed that Daniel had reported the hidden mark before Rourke accused him of alteration. He confirmed that the Northline samples came from an already exposed paint edge and that none had disturbed an identifier. He also found a fact that gave Evelyn a legitimate argument. The Rourke bill of sale described the item as one incomplete replica body shell, unknown manufacturer. Daniel had signed immediately beneath that language. "You accepted their description," Martin said. "I accepted that they were selling it under that description. I didn't certify it was correct. A court may ask whether you bought it hoping the description was wrong." "I did." Daniel did not decorate the answer. He had taken a calculated risk. That did not make him a thief, but it kept him from pretending to be a victim of every consequence. Martin then asked whether Daniel would consent to immediate secured transport. The shell would move to a bonded warehouse where the state, Crescent, the foundation, and Rourke could inspect it under one evidence protocol. The moment Daniel signed, the most valuable object ever stored in Mercer frame and body left his possession. Owen watched the bonded carrier close its rear doors. "What if the reward committee says no? Then we still return stolen property. And lose the shop?" Daniel looked at the empty bay. "Maybe." Scout stood between them, his body angled toward the departing truck. Rachel had trained him not to chase vehicles beyond the curb. Even now, with the shell disappearing, he stopped at the line. The emptiness of the bay created Daniel's first immediate problem. He had sacrificed work to preserve the shell, and now he had neither the shell nor enough scheduled repairs to meet the county deadline. He sold the fishing boat he and Rachel had bought before Owen was born. It had not been in the water since her diagnosis. The sale brought $9,000, enough to make a partial tax payment and secure a 60-day extension. Owen helped roll the empty trailer behind the shop. He ran his hand over the faded registration sticker and said nothing. Daniel knew the boy remembered Rachel teaching him to tie a dock line. Selling the boat was not tragedy. It was arithmetic with a memory attached. At the bonded warehouse, the evidence grew stronger. Mara Vance arrived with 2 archive trustees and a sealed packet of factory construction photographs. The images showed X4 in bare metal. A removable crossbrace sat behind the rear bulkhead. 3 non-standard holes supported the data recorder. The left rear pocket carried the same crescent dent, documented after a 1972 endurance test. Northline mapped the hidden stamp with 3-dimensional microscopy. The depth varied with the curvature of the tunnel in a way expected from hand stamping before final assembly. Microscopic corrosion continued uninterrupted through the lowest points of the characters. A modern stamp would have cut through that corrosion. Still, Mara refused to certify the identity until one final check. The construction photographs showed that a technician had corrected a misplaced weld on X4 by grinding a narrow fish-shaped groove and re-welding it from the inside. The repair was invisible from the exterior. Under a portable X-ray panel, the same fish-shaped weld appeared inside Daniel's shell. Mara signed the preliminary authentication statement identifying the body as Porsche Experimental Chassis X4. "This is the missing Porsche prototype body," she said. "Not because of one number, because the number, materials, fixture points, paint sequence, damage history, and hidden repair all agree. The shell's estimated market value, unrestored and with a documented recovery, fell between $11 and $13 million. The amount did not come from the weight of its metal. It came from its unique place in a development program, its uninterrupted archive record before the theft, and the fact that the other 3 experimental bodies no longer existed in original form." Daniel felt no burst of ownership. The signed custody form on the table made clear that Crescent held the recovered property. What he felt was smaller and more durable, the satisfaction of a measurement closing exactly where it should. Evelyn's attorney asked to speak with him in a conference room away from the inspectors. Evelyn sat at the far end of the table with a new agreement in front of her. This one offered $300,000 from a Rourke-affiliated holding company. Daniel would assign any finder's reward, restoration contract, media rights, and claims against the dealership. The company would then manage the return to Crescent. "You have done the hard part," Evelyn said. "You should be paid now, instead of waiting months for an insurer's committee." "Why does your company want the reward if you didn't know what the shell was?" "Because we sold it, and because our network has the facilities to restore it. You also called it fake in public. I repeated the information available to me." Daniel slid the agreement back. "Then let the available information be examined." Evelyn leaned forward. "Your wife's medical debt nearly closed your shop. Your tax account is public. Your son is watching you gamble with his home. I am offering certainty." Daniel's hands stayed flat on the table, but the mention of Rachel changed the room. "My family is not part of your intake file. Your finances are part of any credible negotiation. Then here is mine. I will accept what the lawful recovery process awards. I will not sell you my evidence or let you stand between the shell and its owner." He stood and left before anger could turn a clean refusal into a speech. That night, Scout waited by Rachel's side of the bed, as he sometimes did when thunder came. Daniel sat on the floor and repaired the leather beneath the brass tag with a hand punch. Owen leaned against the doorframe. $300,000, the boy said. "I heard the number." She knew about Mom. She knew a public debt record. Daniel threaded the collar through the buckle. "That isn't the same as knowing her." Owen came into the room and sat beside Scout. "Are you scared you made the wrong choice?" "Yes." The boy waited for more, but Daniel did not convert fear into wisdom for him. He only fastened the collar and checked that the new ring could not catch again. Evelyn made her next move before Crescent completed its review. Rourke Heritage Motors filed a civil petition seeking rescission of the auction sale and control of the recovery. The filing claimed Daniel had bought the shell with specialized knowledge he failed to disclose, had interfered with an identification plate, and had used the threat of publicity to extract money. It attached the auction clip and Daniel's email to Mara as evidence that he had promoted an unverified prototype claim. On the same day, the dealership published a statement saying it had acted immediately after irregular conduct by a purchaser came to its attention. Daniel had never threatened publicity and had asked for no payment from Rourke, but a legal filing did not need to be true in every sentence to be expensive. His attorney estimated that answering the petition and protecting his reward claim could require $15,000 before any hearing. The county extension gave him 53 days. The recovery committee had no fixed deadline. The easy money was gone. Detective Ortiz brought one piece of protection. The state had obtained the auction platform's original video from its server, not from either party. The wide camera showed the false plate and bright rivets, while the shell still sat in Rourke's secured warehouse, 2 days before Daniel entered the property. A second angle showed Evelyn's auction manager lifting the front cover and pointing at the plate during lot preparation. That evidence disproved the claim that Daniel had installed the outer identifier. It did not show whether Rourke knew about the hidden stamp. For that, Crescent used the insurance policy's recovery clause. Any business seeking reimbursement or control after possessing recovered insured property had to produce its intake records. Rourke initially supplied a one-page checklist marked "Replica Shell, Scrap Only." Martin Shaw noticed the checklist jumped from digital record 6,418 to 6,421. He requested the missing entries and server audit history. Rourke objected. A judge ordered preservation of the records until the upcoming recovery hearing. 3 days later, a forensic export restored record 6,419. It was an intake note written 9 months before the auction by Earl Bennett, a 60-year-old inspection technician at Rourke's salvage division. Earl had photographed the crooked plate, passed a camera through the tunnel opening, and recorded 6 seconds of X04118 beneath the black sealant. His note read, "Possible experimental chassis. Harland theft, circular resembles rear reinforcement. Hold for specialty review before cataloging." The system showed the note had been routed to Evelyn Rourke and her chief operating officer. 41 minutes later, the hold status was removed. A replacement note classified the shell as an unidentified replica suitable for non-title sale. There was also an internal email. The chief operating officer had asked whether the Harland Foundation should be contacted. Evelyn replied that an unverified theft flag would freeze the entire salvage collection, alarm the lender, and delay a quarter-end asset sale. Her final instruction was short: do not authenticate, move the body as replica inventory, and preserve no value claim. The message did not prove she had stolen the shell. It proved she had seen a specific warning, stopped the review, and sold the body under a description designed to avoid the consequence of knowing more. Martin called Daniel after reading the export. Her attorneys want settlement discussions. Does Crescent still need the hearing? Yes. Ownership, custody costs, your reward eligibility, and Rourke's claims all need an enforceable order. The evidence also belongs in the regulatory record. Then we go to the hearing. Daniel's answer closed the easiest remaining exit. The hearing took place in the Bellwether County Courthouse because the auction sale, the disputed possession, and the first evidence report had all occurred in the county. The courtroom was public, but the judge barred live broadcasting of unreleased insurance records. That mattered to Daniel. He wanted a decision that could survive review, not a performance built around Evelyn's audience. Owen sat behind him with Gus Webb from the Fleet Company. Scout stayed at home on Rachel's mat. Daniel had considered bringing the brass tag as a reminder, then decided against it. The tag belonged on the dog. The evidence could stand without a sentimental object beside it. Crescent's attorney presented the history in plain order. The factory transferred X4 to Anders Harland. Harland insured it. The shell was stolen. Crescent paid the loss and received recovery rights. Daniel later bought an object Rourke, described as a replica, discovered the hidden stamp without disturbing it, reported the discovery, and transferred the body into secured custody. Mara Vance explained why 6 independent features established identity: period steel, experimental fixture points, the paint sequence, the crescent dent, the hidden fish-shaped weld, and the original X4 stamp. She projected each archive photograph beside a current forensic image. No single feature carried the conclusion. Together, they left no reasonable competing shell. Evelyn's attorney did not deny the authentication. He argued that Rourke had acquired the salvage collection in good faith, that Earl Bennett's note was preliminary, and that Evelyn had acted to prevent an unverified allegation from freezing millions of dollars in unrelated inventory. Daniel, he said, had bought a shell he suspected was undervalued, and then rejected 2 commercially reasonable offers. The judge asked Daniel whether that was true. "I suspected the description might be wrong," Daniel said. "I did not know the shell was stolen. When I learned it might be, I contacted the state and the insurer." "Why did you reject $300,000? "Because the offer required me to assign the evidence and the recovery to a company that had already sold the shell once. I could not verify what would happen after that." Evelyn's attorney pointed out that Daniel needed the money. Daniel agreed. The answer weakened any claim that he had been indifferent to profit. It also made clear that he had refused the offer despite its value, not because it was meaningless to him. Then Martin introduced the auction server video. The false outer plate appeared before Daniel's purchase. Northline's file hashes showed the hidden stamp video had not been edited. The forensic export showed Earl's intake warning, the removed hold, and Evelyn's instruction to move the shell without authenticating it. Evelyn took the witness stand. She said the salvage acquisition was tied to a lender deadline and contained more than 200 lots. Freezing the collection over every speculative note would have jeopardized employees and creditors. She had believed the shell was probably an old racing copy with a fabricated number. Selling it as a replica, she argued, disclosed the uncertainty and prevented a buyer from paying a false premium. For a moment, Daniel could understand the business decision. A dealer could not treat every rumor as proven history. Then, Crescent's attorney asked why Evelyn had not sent the shell to Specialty Review, as Earl recommended, or disclosed the Harland warning in the auction description. Because disclosure would have repeated an unverified theft accusation, she said. Why did you demand every copy of Mr. Mercer's inspection video? To control incomplete information connected to our brand. Why did your public statement say you acted when purchaser misconduct came to light, when the server shows you received the hidden number 9 months earlier? Evelyn looked toward her attorneys. The judge instructed her to answer. I did not consider the intake image reliable. The final document made that answer impossible to maintain. Earl's original 6-second video played on the courtroom monitor. It showed the same black sealant, the same tunnel ledge, and X04118 in the same position Daniel later recorded. At the end of the clip, Earl's camera tilted toward a paper inspection card. Evelyn's handwritten initials appeared beside the words, "Reviewed in person." No one applauded. The judge simply asked the clerk to mark the video as an admitted exhibit. That small procedural sentence changed the balance of the case more completely than any angry speech could have done. The court recognized Crescent's recovery title and approved transfer of X4 to the Harland Motor Foundation under the insurer's reacquisition agreement. Rourke's request for control was denied. Its allegation that Daniel had altered the identifiers was dismissed with prejudice after the auction footage and intake video established the plate and hidden stamp before his purchase. The judge did not declare Evelyn a criminal. He ordered the record preserved and referred the intake alteration, public accusation, and sworn testimony to the State Dealer Licensing Board and the Attorney General's Consumer Division. He also ruled that Daniel qualified as the reporting finder under the recovery notice, subject to Crescent's valuation and conduct review. Rourke was ordered to refund the $800 and pay Daniel's reasonable legal costs because its false alteration claim had prolonged the proceeding. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Evelyn. Daniel took Owen through a side corridor and returned to the shop. He still had no reward check, and the county extension was still running. A court order had corrected the record, but it did not repair a roof or fill a work schedule. That distinction became important during the next 90 days. Crescent reviewed every transfer, every image, and every payment Daniel had received. The foundation commissioned 2 independent valuations. Daniel reopened the measurement bay and worked 12-hour days on ordinary trucks. Gus Webb restored the postponed utility account after reading the dismissal order, but Daniel accepted only the jobs his small crew could finish safely. Evelyn's board placed her on administrative leave the afternoon Earl's intake video became public through the court record. 6 weeks later, the licensing board found that Rourke Heritage Motors had materially misrepresented the shell and had failed to preserve an identity warning. The company paid a civil penalty, adopted outside review for disputed identifiers, and withdrew its statement about Daniel. Evelyn resigned as chief executive while the Attorney General continued reviewing the altered intake record. Her consequence came from the concealment and accusation, not from laughing at an inexpensive shell. Earl Bennett kept his job. The new compliance officer restored his original note to the permanent record and required a second inspector before any future hold could be removed. Daniel called Earl once. "You wrote down what you saw," Daniel said. "Didn't do much good at the time. It did when the record was opened. That was all either man needed from the conversation." Crescent's committee set the recovered value at $12,400,000. Under the old notice, 10% would have been $1,240,000 below the cap. After deducting no penalty for Daniel's conduct and crediting his documented preservation expenses, the committee awarded him $1,242,800. The extra $2,800 repaid the Northline invoice dollar for dollar. Daniel received the payment by verified transfer, not by an oversized check in a crowded room. He paid the county balance, cleared the roof loan, restored the shop reserve, and put enough into a protected education account for Owen to choose training or college without selling the building. He did not buy another boat. The Harland Foundation made a separate proposal. X4 would require 18 months of documentation before any restoration decision. Every fastener, paint layer, repair, and later alteration had to be mapped. The foundation wanted Daniel to lead the body structure record because he had already shown he could distinguish measurement from assumption. The contract paid his shop $240,000 over 18 months, and required apprentices from a regional trade school to observe the work. Daniel accepted on one condition. The exhibit would credit Earl's intake warning, Mara's authentication team, Northline's testing, and the original unnamed technicians whose welds had preserved the shell. Finding the body did not make Daniel its creator. Mara agreed before the Foundation Board finished reading the condition. Owen spent part of the following summer in the documentation bay. He learned to photograph a measurement scale without creating perspective error and to label a removed fastener so another person could return it to the exact hole. He also learned that restoration often meant deciding what not to change. The gray primer remained for the first exhibition because it belonged to the theft history. A small, protected opening allowed visitors to see the inner stamp through a fixed mirror. On the evening before the exhibit opened, the Foundation allowed Daniel and Owen into the quiet gallery after the installation crew left. They brought Scout through a service entrance with the curator's permission. The old dog moved slowly now. He crossed the polished floor, sniffed the base of the display, and settled beside Daniel's boots. The shell stood on a low steel platform, still empty and scarred, with the false outer plate displayed separately as evidence of concealment. Across from it, the mirror caught X04118 beneath the tunnel light. The label did not call Daniel the owner. It called him the reporting finder and preservation lead. Owen read the final paragraph, which explained that the hidden stamp had first been seen while Daniel recovered a fallen collar tag. They wanted to display Scout's tag too, he said. It wasn't theirs. Owen smiled and knelt beside the dog. The stainless ring Daniel had fitted months earlier was worn smooth at one edge. Owen checked it, tightened the collar by one notch, and turned the brass heart so the word home faced outward. Daniel looked once more at the prototype he had paid for, protected, and returned. It had saved his shop without becoming his property. More important, Owen had watched him give up possession before anyone could promise a reward. Money had arrived later. The decision had not depended on it. When they left the gallery, Scout's tag made a soft, steady sound against his collar. The mirror light stayed on behind them, illuminating the real number inside the shell, while the false one rested under glass.